Well, the cool down is important because you want to bring the body back to its resting state after a workout, right? You've just completed a lot of high intensity work, you've just completed your circuits, you've gone through the process of sweating, you've gotten the heart rate very high, and now you want to bring it back down to essentially acclimatize it for the rest of your day, right? So that's the key, that's a key component of the cool down. The other thing is, if you include a little bit of stretching at the end of the session, that allows the muscles to recover faster, and so that's also a key component. Well, for 30-minute high-intensity sessions, you don't need a tremendous amount of cool down, especially in the context where athletes are expecting most of the 30 minutes to be high-intensity work. So I'd say 2 to 3 minutes is the ideal amount of time, and obviously if clients want to continue doing a cool down, which is longer and a little bit more stretching afterwards, they can do so. But in the context of a 30-minute session, you wouldn't ever want it to be more than 3 minutes. Well, with regards to structuring the cool down, I think the important thing is to make sure that you are allowing the athletes and reminding the athletes to focus on their breathing. That's the most important thing to bring the heart rate down to more of a resting state. That's the first thing. The second thing that you want to be focused on is you want to pay attention to the muscles which were worked the most, so that you can take the time to stretch and release that muscle group. So in the context of a legs workout, or where there was a lot of focus on your legs and posterior chain, so hamstrings and glutes, you don't want to focus on stretches which are related to the upper body, right? You'd want to focus more on a lying glute stretch or a lying quad stretch or something like that, where you're releasing the muscles which were actively used. Well, one of my favorites, once you just finished a high intensity circuit and you're going into that little cool down, that 2 to 3 minute cool down period, one of my favorites is getting the athlete to get into child's pose, right? So just a basic child's pose. It allows them to breathe, focus on their breathing, right? And this allows the athlete to be in a relaxed position, still stretch out, but at the same time bring their heart rate back down. And if you want to make it more of an active stretch, you can ask the athlete to be in a child's pose and walk the hands out to the left and then to the right to get a nice stretch along the side of the body. So that's one of the exercises that I like. Another one is the spinal stretch, the roll up and roll down. Again, it's a slow movement. You're releasing the tension in the posterior chain wherever the tightness is, right? So some people feel it in the hamstring, some people feel it more in the calf, some people so that's an active that's an active stretch that you can do, which is slow paced, but the athlete can again focus on their breathing. The key thing is you want to bring them to a place where you can congratulate them for their workout at the same time as their heart rate is coming down off of that spike that you had brought them in the circuit portion of the workout, and allow them to release some of the tension that their body's accumulated over the past 30 minutes. I can't think of a situation in which they would have to demonstrate a movement in the cool down. I mean, you can use the demo video, obviously, if somebody's unfamiliar with the movements, but none of these movements should be rocket science. They should not be complex at all. It should be, and you should be walking the athlete through it verbally. So you can have the demo video playing, but again, these are basic movements, and you should be able to verbally cue the athlete through the range of motion that you want them to get into and the position that you want to get into. And they're focusing on breathing anyway. So even if they're just moving slowly into their stretch, as long as they're focusing on their breathing, their heart rate's coming down, that's where you want to bring them. At the end of the session, I think it's important to let athletes know why they did what they did, right? So if you can explain to them how those exercises carry over into the real world, or how those exercises will help them in preparation for the half marathon that they're going to be running, or in preparation for the soccer game that they play, or in preparation for chasing down their kid at daycare, or whatever the case may be. If you can find a way to relate it to sort of everyday tasks, and if you can relate it to something that they are working on themselves, then they'll get a better understanding of why they did what they did, right? And the cool down is a beautiful opportunity to do this, because really they are there focusing on their breathing and they're attentive to what you're saying. So it's an opportunity to have that conversation with them and explain to them why the workout that you just did together was built the way it was built.